Hey everyone, some big news dropped today related to Nothing, the company started by Carl Pei, formerly of OnePlus. This news relates to the Nothing Phone 3, the highly anticipated new flagship phone from the company. As a quick refresher, the last time we saw an actual flagship phone from the brand was in 2023 with the Nothing Phone 2. So it's been a while since we saw an actual flagship phone from the brand. Since then, it's launched a bunch of phones in its A series line, which are more budget-oriented devices, but we've been waiting for that real flagship experience from Nothing for a while, and the Nothing Phone 3 is coming in July, and we just learned some big news about it. So the big news we learned was that the Nothing Phone 3 is going to come with the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4. I have to remember how to say these names because Qualcomm is terrible at naming its processors. Snapdragon 8S Gen 4. So this was surprising because we had all expected it to be the Snapdragon 8 Elite processor. So I'm going to break down what the differences are between these two chips, what you can expect from the Nothing Phone 3. Before I get into that, I want to sort of talk about the chain of events that led us to this. Really early yesterday morning, we heard from Yogesh Brar, who is a reliable leaker online. He posted a tweet, which you can see right here, saying that the Nothing Phone 3 is going to be powered by the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4. So, Android Authority wrote an article about it, talking about how this leak, was news, and we even saw some votes down here for people, from people who, wanted to express their opinion about this leak. So I'll just vote here. I'll say it's a great move, but that'll show us the results that we can see from the rest of the world. And yeah, hold on, this is going, there we go. So yeah, it seems that not many people think this is a great move, and most people think that, or many people think that it should have been using the 8 Elite, and then the rest of the people think that they want to hold judgment until they see all the other specs. So the reason that this was disappointing news here was because Carl Pei, over the past few weeks, has been constantly referencing the Nothing Phone 3 as being, quote, a true flagship. Naturally, in 2025, whenever Android fans hear the term true flagship, the first thing they think is a flagship processor, which would be the Snapdragon 8 Elite. But later on, the same day yesterday, we saw that Carl Pei had confirmed that the Nothing Phone 3 will definitely have the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 in it. So here he is in a YouTube video talking about the phone, and eventually later on in the video is 40 minutes long, but eventually he confirms that the processor is the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4. So let's talk about what this actually means for the phone. So the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 is a newer processor than the Snapdragon 8 Elite, but it is less powerful. Once again, Qualcomm is terrible at naming its chipsets, and the S in the Snapdragon 8S means that it is a nerfed down version of the Snapdragon 8 series phone. So not as good as the 8 Elite. The biggest thing that's different here is the construction of the chip itself. The CPU inside the 8S Gen 4 is based on the previous kind of architecture that Qualcomm used for its flagship processors. The Snapdragon 8 Elite was the first one with the Orion CPU architecture, which is newer, better, and it's part of the reason why the Snapdragon 8 Elite is so much more powerful than the previous Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. So the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 is kind of this middle of the road one. It's a little bit better maybe than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 from a few years ago, but it's not as good as the Snapdragon 8 Elite when it comes to raw processing power. Likewise, the GPU is also not as good. So if you're a heavy gamer and you're looking forward to playing a lot of games on the upcoming Nothing Phone 3, your gaming experience probably isn't going to be as good as it would be with a phone from the Snapdragon 8 Elite processor. And that would be something like a Galaxy S25, a OnePlus 13, or a bunch of other phones that you can find with the 8 Elite inside. So weaker CPU, weaker GPU, not great. Some other more minor things, though, are also not going to be there, and that includes the ability to shoot at 8K. So if you're a person who likes to shoot a lot of video and you want to bump up above 4K, you can't do that with the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4. 8K is just not supported on the hardware level, so it's not going to work. Likewise, 4K footage shot at 120 FPS is also not supported. So if you like to shoot a lot of slow-mo videos in 4K, you're not gonna be able to do that on the Nothing Phone 3. You will be able to shoot slow-mo, but it won't be at 4K. It'll probably be at 1080p. Another notable limitation of the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 is that it does not support millimeter wave 5G connectivity. This probably doesn't mean anything for people who live outside of the United States because millimeter wave is pretty much a United States only thing. But if you are somebody who relies on millimeter wave connectivity in the United States on your current smartphone, you're not going to get that on the Nothing Phone 3. And this is not something that can be updated later. This is at the hardware level, the processor does not support it. So you're going to be stuck on sub 6. Now, once again, that's not a big deal. People who live outside the United States, and even people who live in the United States probably don't connect to millimeter wave too often. But if you live in a certain area and you know you get millimeter wave connectivity, you're not going to get that on the Nothing Phone 3. So this is all disappointing, but I don't want to make it sound like the Nothing Phone 3 is not going to be good. The processor, the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 is a great processor. This is more powerful than any processor that's ever been in a Nothing Phone before. If you remember back, the Nothing Phones have always sort of been behind the curve when it comes to processing power. The Nothing Phone 1 had a very weak processor. It was from the Snapdragon 7 series, so not even in the 8 series. It was much lower quality than we were seeing around the time that the Nothing Phone 1 launched. And then the Nothing Phone 2 also had last year's, the previous year's model inside instead of the most recent one. All the Nothing Phone A series phones that have released since then, the Nothing Phone 2A and the 2A Plus and the 3A Pro, all those phones all have lower end processors from varying brands. So yeah, once again, we were really hoping that the Nothing Phone 3 was going to buck this trend and finally deliver that top of the line true flagship experience that Carl Pei had promised, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. So I don't want you to think that the Nothing Phone 3 is going to be bad. It's going to be a very powerful processor. It's Qualcomm. It's a terrific brand. You're going to see a lot of great performance. You're going to get a lot of good gaming performance. It's just not going to be as good as that Snapdragon 8 Elite. You might be wondering, what does the Nothing Phone 3 look like? And you might be thinking that it looks like this. And when it leaked, people immediately thought that that's what it was, but it's not. And I'll explain in a second, but this is something else. First dead giveaway that this was not going to be the Nothing Phone 3 is that you can see there's no wireless charging coil here. The Nothing Phone 2 had wireless charging, and it's the most recent flagship phone from Nothing. So one would hazard to guess that the Nothing Phone 3 would also have wireless charging. The fact that it doesn't have a wireless charging coil here probably means that this is not the Nothing Phone 3, which was something we immediately noticed when we first saw this leak. The fact that it also looks a lot like the Nothing Phone 3A and 3A Pro is also a dead giveaway that this probably isn't the Nothing Phone 3. So what is this if this is not the Nothing Phone 3? This is actually a rejected prototype for the Nothing Phone 3A series. So you can see in this photo here, we have some various design propositions that Nothing was going through to decide what the Nothing Phone 3A series is going to look like. You can see here that this is the actual Nothing Phone 3A Pro. That's the one that actually came out and what it looks like. And then over here are just two other phones that ended up getting rejected as far as their design. And this one here, this white one, is the leaked one here. So yeah, if you saw this phone here, this leaked render, and said to yourself, oh, that's the Nothing Phone 3, unfortunately, that's not it. So what does the phone look like? Unfortunately, we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen a reliable leak showing what the Nothing Phone 3 actually looks like. So as of publishing this video, we don't know, but hopefully we will find out over the next few weeks because the Nothing Phone 3 is launching on July 1st. So we only have a few weeks to go before we actually see the phone in the flesh. So yeah, that's everything you need to know about the Nothing Phone 3 right now. Jump down in the comments and let us know what you think about the fact that it has a Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 processor instead of the Snapdragon 8 Elite. And I'll also leave links in the description to the articles that I show here, the video of Carl Pei and the renders that are not the Nothing Phone 3, so you can check those out for yourself. Yeah, but thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time there's some big news drop.